the centripetal and the centrifugal. So there's a saying in Tai Chi, 9 years learn to yield, then 1 year learn to attack. Yielding is the centripetal. It's the drawing in, the detachment, the dark, cold, condensed center. The true home, it's like, you know, where do you stem from? Where do you spring from? So once you find that, then coming out is just, we all know how to come out because we live in a world. We have friends, we have things we have to do. So we all know how to come out of ourselves. But the problem is we come out from the wrong place because we haven't found the correct place to actually go into. That's the whole idea of meditation. You're trying to go into a more true center than the one that you normally do in your non-meditating life. And the center, it's calm and it's quiet and it's detached. It's like the eye of the storm, the calm at the center of the storm. So in Tai Chi, that is the Dan Qian. So that's the place that we naturally just try to come to. Feeling it as just the center of your being. It's like the opposite of the head. The head, when you come into the head, you naturally think. So there's a natural activity up here, and there's a natural inactivity down here. So this is the centripetal, just coming back to the true home, to the true center. So let's just try pulling it in. You don't have to use a lot of force, and then just opening it out. Drawing the belly in, and then opening it out. So remember when we started doing this exercise all those years ago, what we did it for was because when you contract here, if you can really feel the center of the contraction, which part of my body is actually pulling the most, then that is the Dan Qian. So we originally started this exercise as a way of locating the Dan Qian and getting a feeling for it. So I have to tighten the belly muscles, but not too forcefully. Feel the part of me inside that pulls, that starts those muscles pulling towards themselves. And the Dan Qian is like a sphincter, like a ring muscle. So when you tighten it in here, it's very like, you know, tightening your anus or tightening the sphincter of the urethra to stop yourself from peeing. So we all know what it's like to be dying for a pee, and you're having to really clench down here to stop it coming out. That's the feeling here. You're clenching, but not in the urethra, but just here in the Dan Qian. And then you just let it go. And that ring muscle, which is tightened up into a tight ball, relaxes out. And there's a sense that something can come through the ring, can come through the hole. So here I have a feeling that it's pulling into itself. And then here it's like something is blossoming out of it. And now just feel that center. It's like a point that's surrounded by this ever-expanding series of concentric rings or concentric spheres. And now let's just try the heart, Qigong. Keep your mind with the Dam Qian. This is the largeness, the largesse, the bigger picture. So you reaching out into the world. But we want to make sure it's coming from here. So the attacking springs naturally from the yielding. So if I'm in my center correctly and quietly and peacefully, then my spirit will naturally be reaching into the world. So the two belong together. This is the centrifugal. Something is fleeing from the center. But you have to find that center first before your outward can be truly compassionate. Otherwise, it will always be discriminatory. There'll always be a duality there. You'll prefer this to that. You'll give your love to this, but not to that. Keep the hands out. And now just turning. So maybe turn one hand over. So the hand that you're turning towards is the one that's facing up. So you've got one hand facing up, one hand facing down, and then they switch around when you change direction. So with turning, the centrifugal gets stronger. And then just back to the front. So you have to see the flow, feel the danchen, and just imagine a flow of energy coming up and down the arms. And it's that surging flow that maintains the structure. We don't like the danchen, largely because it's the opposite of the head. Just tipping. So you can just make this as gentle as you like. So it's a bit like the full and empty exercise. So you can imagine like a ball of heaviness rolling down the arm into the bottom hand, and a ball of lightness, a ball of emptiness rolling up against that to the upper hand. So there's always two flows. Again, this is where the mind is naturally going to. You just want to naturally go back to the quiet place. Mind in danchen, or quiet mind. Acquiring a quiet mind is probably the most difficult task a modern human can engage upon. So the more advanced we've become technologically, the more spare time we have in our hands, and the more idle we've basically become, and the more noisy inside, and the shorter the attention span. So tip of the tongue on the roof of the mouth. That's like the upper equivalent of mind in the Dantian. The same thing, but standing. So my legs have to be really soft, accepting. My legs are just allowing me to sink through them. They're not trying to push me up like this. Because without that, the energy just won't be able to pool in the Dantian. So you'll find yourself pushing yourself up into your head all the time, which is what straightening legs does. So the knees out and the toes in. So what that means is really, so all the verbs are very active in Tai Chi. So the knees out, it really means the knees are tending to move out all the time. The toes are tending to move in all the time. I don't just push the knees out and then just lock it. It has to remain in motion. There has to remain this intention, this energy flow. Feel the sacrum. That is tending downwards. Feel it here. This is tending upwards, stretching upwards. A tendency is just a stretching, same as a tension. And then just the arms. Elbows are tending outwards, away from each other, and the hands are tending inward towards each other. So our yielding posture is a posture of natural supination. Knees and elbows and ankles going out. The toes are coming in, but I'm pulling off the instep. Part of my mind is just condensing and settling here quietly. Almost like it just doesn't have a care in the world. And another part of my mind is expanding outwards. But without this, the expansion is generally egocentric. Because if you don't have your true center here, you'll have your center in your ego, in your sense of self. And so what comes out of you, what expands out of you, will always be a reflection of that. So the centripetal, the drawing in, and the centrifugal, the releasing outwards. And now let's just turn. So as soon as we produce a turn, the forces, the centripetal and the centrifugal, get stronger. The turning tends to fling whatever's got weight, whatever's got mass, outward away from the center, so that another part of you has to pull into that center to balance that. And just watch it. Watch the legs as well. So whenever I do something, really, whenever I turn or move, there's a tendency for the legs to push me upwards. Part of me is really trying to just melt through the legs all the time. And then just bring your mind to the return. If it was simply centrifugal and centripetal that we were interested in, then we would just become whirling dervishes. That's all we'd need to do. We'd just need to spin. And I'd love to do that. But here there's a return. So I turn to one side, and then there's a turn the other side. And what we want is to just make sure that the return comes from the centripetal. It comes from the pulling, comes from my empty back leg pulling me round. So everything that we do starts off with a yield, starts off with a filling. But of course, in order to fill, I must first have emptied. So really, there's never a start. There's always a phase that precedes the one that you're looking at. And that's the turning, that's the returning, really. One phase melting into the other. So slowly, with repetition, it becomes a meditation. So what do we mean by that? We mean that what we're interested in really is how the movement, the technique, is affecting my mind and my feelings, not my thinking mind. So what is it that allows this leg to empty? And emptying into the world. And then what is it that makes that empty leg fill? It's not a selfish pulling into itself, it's an embrace. You go behind something and draw it in. So Tai Chi is all about connection. So you can just turn it into like waving hands in the clouds. But the bottom hand, which sort of traditionally is underneath the upper hand, you can just let that be a bit more with the back leg. So I'm drawing up the back leg, and then the hand that comes down, instead of coming directly underneath, just let it be with the back leg a little bit. So you can think of the hand that's going down being with the emptying, but also being with the lower body. Let's bring it back. Feel the upper arm from the shoulder down to the elbow. So that is extending, and that itself is making a circle behind the person. Your hand is obviously in front of the person. So your hand is between you and them, but your upper arm extending from the elbow is reaching behind them. And it's the same in here. So my knees are sort of reaching around the person, but my toes are connecting to the smaller circle, which is my space. So there's the big space, which contains me and the other person. And then there's the smaller space, which is just mine. And you can do this with another person standing there, and just feel the quality of the two circles, really. The small one, which is protecting my space, and then the big one, which is including, embracing the other. The elbows are important. They're important in ward off because they reach around the other person. but they're also important in attack because they reach down into the earth and help you tap that energy. Now let's try the circles. My hand is beginning to come in towards me, but this is still reaching around the back of the other person. You can think of your hand as dealing with the other person's hand at the same time that a bigger part of you has to be still trying to include their whole body. Part of your mind is with your hand, and part of your mind is with your elbow. And I make connection with the hand, and the elbow keeps trying to get behind. And it's only really when I feel that I've made that circle from my elbow that I come back and take over with the hand again and bring the hand down into the lower body. So you remember John's classes, would generally be taught by an instructor. And then he would come in to correct our postures, to watch what we were doing, offer some words of advice and wisdom, and then just go around and physically adjust each person's posture at least once. So I remember one class, and he just came in and he said, okay, let me see the posture that you've just been learning. So we did it, and he just watched with his furrowed brow. And then he just said one word. He just said, elbows, turned around and walked out of the room. And it just blew my mind, because I just realized in that instant that it's all elbows. So Dr. Chi used to say, when you attack, like when you're coming forwards for push, don't think about the hands. Don't have your mind in your hands. Your mind is in your elbows. The elbows drop down, and then there's a natural coming up in the hands. So there's a natural uprooting, because your elbows are going down and trying to get under the person at the same time that the forearms are straightening, so the hands are coming up. So that's when you get the cutting vegetable energy of uprooting. Part of you is getting underneath their root, and another part of you is pushing upwards. For me, the big insight with this one that's recently come out of my practice is just making sure you connect with the legs here. The Tai Chi, it tends to be very sort of up above the hips, so ward off, roll back, press, push. All the postures are sort of above the hips, and then we just assume the legs are just taking care of us. But actually, we don't sink. We can always sink a bit more. The best way to get this part of the lower part of the body really active is to just make sure you get the hands down into that region at least some of the time. So whenever there's like a brush knee and push, this hand should almost be as low as your knee. And actually, if you watch other styles of Tai Chi, the sunk ones, especially like the modern Chinese ones, like the 24 posture form, it's very low. And in order to sink low, this area has to be very open. Don't just drop your hand down here. You've got to go down with your mind. It's not like the way we used to do roll back, where we just drop the hand down and then just assume it's going to swing up. You're with the hand. It's taking you down. You don't just let go of it and just let it drop and let it swing back up. So here, I've got to really let it draw not just itself, but the whole of me down. So this is difficult. It's difficult physically, but it's much more difficult mentally, because it requires a different mind. It requires a mind that's not so full of itself. So we tell ourselves, it's in pain. I can't go down there. I can't go that low. I don't have the flexibility. Actually, what it is just you're just chicken. And now let's just bring it back. That very first posture of the form. So we'd sink down, step out, circle. So this is preparation. Now let's just think about beginning, which is the next bit, bringing the hands up. So we'd just bring the hands up and then just let them drop. And then as they reached horizontal, we would bend the knees as well. Try it slightly differently. Beginning is the same. I step out and then I move across and just let the hands circle until I've got most of the weight in the left foot. And now just bring the hands up. As you do so, just tighten into the belly in order to establish that as a real center. Now to bring the hands down, instead of just letting them come over the top and then bending the legs at the end of that, just bend the legs and just let the hands come down. They come down pretty much the same way they went up. stepping to the side, circling, and then hands come up, and then I bend the legs. It's my legs bending that takes me down. And you end up getting quite low. So this is the sort of height the form should be done at, I think. And so here, you've got these big reaching postures. Stepping with the other foot. Stepping out, circling. And then up with the hands, and then I bend the knees, and that brings the hands down. But it definitely starts in the knees. The other side again. So sinking down, outside edge. Stepping out. So technically, what you can do is just move across like this. But technically what's happening is you're circling here and then you're circling here. So we're just really just doing the exercise that we've just done. I sink down, step across. It's got to stay in this foot. So let's just try that. So I have to be able to just stay in this leg. I step to the side. I have to be single weighted. I don't want to put the weight in that foot ignorantly. The weight goes into this leg. In order to send this foot out, I have to sink even more in this direction to balance the center of gravity that's moved across. And now from here, I circle here. I'm doing this. Don't move the weight. Keep the weight in the foot you sank into. Sinking into my right foot, stepping with my left. And now just stay in the left foot and just whip the waist. So you can just make circles with this hand. Let's try the other side. It's real mindfulness. Your mind has to be absolutely careful and really know how to pay attention to your own body. So I sink down into my left foot and then I step with my right. I put that foot down. Now I keep the weight in the left foot. I'm not moving my weight at all for this. This is the hinge of the door. And I'm just opening and closing the door. And that's swinging the arm around because the arm is completely loose. So I sink down. I step out. And then I stay in this foot. So I just circle the hand round. And it's as it comes in, that's what pulls me into this foot. And then once I'm in this foot, it releases this one. And then that can do a circle. So this is basically what's happening. And then when we do the form, we just sort of stylize it and do them both together. But this is the mechanics. So I sink into one foot. I step out. Now, when I step out, I want to feel the two minds. Part of my mind and spirit is with this foot, that's dipping out into the unknown, testing the water to see if it's hot or cold. And another part of my mind is having to move in this direction to balance it. So I sink down, the knee comes up, and then the foot goes out. But there's always the two directions. If part of me is going to go out in this direction, part of me must also be moving in this direction. Otherwise, I'll lose balance. I'll get the foot down, and then I just circle here. And as it comes in, that pulls me into the foot, which releases the other one that can then do its circle. And so I end up having finished that preparation exercise. sinking down into my right leg. Stepping out. So if anything, I have even more than 100% of my weight in my right foot now. Pulling into my left foot, that's it, and then circling out here. So you're actually moving towards this foot, but you haven't quite come out of this foot. So it doesn't really matter about 70-30. It's the movement, it's where you're going that counts. So to be 70-30 and to be locked in that is worse than being 50-50 and somehow mobile. So I'm in this, and now here I'm moving out of this leg. This freeze frame here is still a little bit more in this foot. This goes out, so I have to really feel myself moving in this direction. And then I circle. I pull myself into that foot, and I circle here. And this, if I kept it going, it would just be the circling exercise, pulling me from leg to leg. So as the hand comes towards my body, it's pulling me into that side. Again, mind with the elbows if you can, and just let the hand take care of itself. So the hand really sort of just makes connections. It's like if you were reaching for something, you'd have to grab it with your hand. You couldn't grab it with your elbow. So the hand is sort of making the connection, but the elbow is directing the energy. Circles, circles everywhere. Like a cape that I'm throwing around the person. They're becoming shrouded, enveloped by my energy. Let's just bring it back to riding horse. So just this expansion here, not just the knees going out. The knees go out because this has released here, these pockets. And the elbows go out because these have released here. It's the release here that allows my elbow to pull my shoulder out from its natural position. So it really springs from openness. This is the thing that's so difficult. It's very, very difficult to open up. Partly because we don't know when we're not. We don't know when we're closed, because we're closed all the time, really. You only need to open just a little bit to feel completely different. And what will open you is the spirit. So when the spirit opens up, when it sparks open and lifts, and you just feel more alive and more interested and more ready, more alert, that's when something inside you has opened up. But it's difficult to sustain. Okay, let's just try a bit of the form. And just try and just sink a bit, tiny bit more than you're used to. Let the knees bending be what takes the hands down. And then you can get quite low here. So again, the bottom hand, you want it beneath the hips. It's very much in the region of the legs. And then the other one. So every time we turn, especially every time we yield, we're really sinking. The energy beneath the danchen is of a very different quality to the sort of overactive fizzy energy that's above the danchen. It's thick. The energy beneath the danchen, close to the ground, is thick. So it's like you're wading through something. Just think of young Cheng Fu in those early photographs, just how close to the ground he is. And now let's try that last one. Relaxing back, but again, I'm really sinking into this leg, something I don't normally do. I sink onto it. You've got to sink through it. I have to really feel the ground, feel the root. And I sink into this leg, down through it. The arm folds across the body, and then I withdraw, straighten up, and then come forwards to push. So we're in the front foot, having done the punch. So we have to stay in that leg. This is what everyone gets wrong when they do this posture. As they turn here, they go back. If you do that, you'll just suck the other person right into you and they'll knock you over. So what's happening here? Someone has got their hands on me here and they're trying to push into me. They're trying to push in this direction to send me backwards. So this is a very difficult yield. So what you have to do is just stay in the front foot and basically just turn and just whip the person on a tight circle in that direction. I stay in the front foot and just open the hand, and like you're releasing something off the palm, like a little bird's flying out of the hand, and you're really twisted up, and your left hand has come underneath your right arm. And then you just draw this like you're using this shape here to scrape a grip off your arm, which is what you're doing. And use that to go back into the back foot. It's still very close. And then turn to get the hands ready to push. And then just bring the weight forwards to push. So I turn. My mind is flying off here in that direction. And that hopefully will redirect the person's energy a little bit. And then you sneak out. And then basically you do the same to them. You push them in the same way they were trying to push you. Turning. Withdraw. And push. So it's called withdraw and push. This is the yield, really. Then this is just sneaking out. So it's a strange posture because it's unlike any other, really. You're with the other person's energy and you're leading the other person's energy. But at the same time, another part of you is sneaking out of that to get behind them. So here I'm leading the other person's energy with this hand and with my mind that's going in this direction. And then I sneak out of that. So I have to sort of disconnect and slip out. And then suddenly I'm here. And they are feeling me over there because that's where I sent my mind. And then I come forward. So suddenly disappear, suddenly appear. So here I've sent myself in that direction, and then I just sneak out, and then suddenly I'm here. And then I just come forwards to push. That's just easy. Mind in the Dantian. A real sense that as soon as you're still, that's just where you naturally come back to. And that's meditation, really. So when you come back to the cushion, you come back to sitting, gravity is allowed to just wash down through you, and you just naturally find yourself pooling here. So there may still be activity here, but you just lose interest in it. You just come back to this place.